Okay. Sweet.
Wait.
Wait. Hang on. Need to find the deck. Okay, here we go. Perfect. Here it is. Okay.
Okay, perfect. I can see the screen too. That's good. Alrighty. All right, well, let's get started. So, hi, I'm Allison Yates, and today me and Sarah are going to be doing our presentation for sports and spirituality. And let's go to the next slide. We're going to go over two topics. We're going to go over meaning without sports. That's what I'm going to talk about. And Sarah's going to talk about selling one's soul to sports and what that looks like and kind of like what that means. Okay, so on the next slide, an overview of what I'm talking about is like what happens when it's taken away, when sports are taken away from injuries. One, we have to deal with the injury, and then two, we have to deal with like the mental like effects that it has, right? Because if we make sports our purpose in life and that's taken away, we are left empty and hurting. And so we're gonna talk about like how coaches can help us overcome or help us prepare for that if it was to happen, and just kind of what that looks like. So on the next slide, all right. So injuries are going to happen in life. Even if you're not an athlete, they're going to happen. Okay. And so, yes, it's true that we can prepare for injuries and prepare to prevent them. I think athletic trainers do a great job of helping us not get injured, right? We have stretching routines. We got, even like when it comes to the food that we eat that they're helping us do, or even like maybe taping our ankles, like they do a great job of helping us prevent injuries. But injuries are going to happen no matter what. And so the more time an athlete spends playing, the higher the probability of them getting injured is, right? That's just math. The more time we do something, the chances are that we might get injured one day. And there's two types of injuries that we're going to look at. So instant injuries, right? That's where I go to kick a soccer ball, I land on my foot wrong, and I break my ankle or I tear some tendons. And that happens in an instant. And then there's gradual deformation injuries, right? That can look like tendonitis, right? If we're constantly going, and we don't give ourselves a chance to recover, or shin splints, anything like that, that can really set us back. And, it can be a seasonal injury to where we get hurt and it lasts a season and we're out for the rest of the season, or maybe a moment or like a week or two within that season. And then there's career ending injuries. And that can look like two things. It can look like one where, you know, we tear our ACL and our knee will never be able to get back to where it was, right? Or it can look like maybe we were out for the rest of the season and we couldn't perform for recruiters. And so it left us, not being able to get the scholarship that we needed. And that kind of made our career come to an end, right? That can be like in high school or maybe even in college. I feel like there's enough film to look back on, if you want to go to the next level there. But either way, it would be a hard thing to overcome if sports were our only thing in life. So let's move on to the next slide. Okay. So what happens to an injured athlete? We talked about how there are physical therapy or, athletic trainers that help us prevent injury. And they're also there when we do get injured, right? They can help us do physical therapy, and they can really help and walk alongside of us as we're healing. But if we look at like athletes, there's not, or athletic programs, there's not really a whole lot of help for our mental space after we've come from an injury, right? And so if it's our only thing, we can be left feeling empty and without purpose. Okay. And that can cause anxiety and depression. Right. You can't even do what you love anymore. You can't do your hobby. And it can leave us feeling in a really dark spot. And, for non Christians, they don't have that. They just have a God sized hole and they don't have any way to fill it. And they're just left feeling hopeless. And so, as coaches and as maybe even parents and as teammates, what can we do to help them, one, kind of beforehand prevent it, and then two, afterwards, step in and help them with just like their mental state, right? So let's go to the next slide. Okay, so what can coaches do? And again, this can be like, what can anyone do? But coaches mainly. So athletes need to have a backup plan for their next step in life. So let's say we're going to go to college, okay, and that's our goal. So as a high school student, I'm preparing for college to get that scholarship. I also need to have a backup plan of like, what am I going to do? And this can, if we take away from injuries for a second and look at like maybe they just weren't as good as they thought they were, right? Maybe they aren't getting that scholarship that they thought they were going to get. So they need to have a backup plan of like how they're going to pay for college, or some ideas like, okay, what could be a fun job that I could have? I think that's just wise. And in Matthew 6:34, it says, don't worry about what tomorrow holds, right? Because God knows our plans, or he has a plan for us. But so with that, we don't want to stress any athlete out, but we just want them to be aware of like, okay, you know, this something could happen, something could go wrong. So what's a backup plan? And that's perfectly fine to have. Okay, and then the next thing coaches can do, they need to help their athletes recognize like values within the sport that they're learning. That way, if they ever step away for a sport, or when they do step away, eventually in life, they're still going to have values that they've learned. So work ethic, determination, not quitting is a big thing, and just like self-control, all these things that we can learn from sports, good sportsmanship, how to treat people. We can learn these things in sports. That way, when sports are gone, we still have these values that we hold to, right? And then the last one is helping them find a bigger purpose in life. So for non-Christians, right, as a lot of athletes are, you know, that looks like charity, giving back to the community, being involved, looking for something other than ourselves to pour into, because just giving back can make anything look good. But as Christians, we know that serving the Lord, everything that we do has purpose because we're doing it unto the Lord. And so if a coach can, and he's in a spot to push like faith in the Lord, man, he needs to do that. He needs to be bold. He needs to step out in faith and show his players that that is the purpose in life. And if he's not in a position, I think he should still do it. But, you know, it's a little sticky. But either way, just showing them that there is more to life than sports. And hopefully one day they'll realize that that's the Lord. But if not, they still have these good habits in life. So, Sarah, if you want to take over now.
Yeah, thanks, Allison. That was a perfect segue into what we're about to talk about, which is that not only injuries can be really tough on an athlete's spiritual life, but also their desire to become God themselves in sport. So selling one's soul to sport, when an athlete's identity is no longer found in God, but it is found in their own performance and worth. This happens all the time. The reason that I wanted to focus on this topic for our research was I work for an ad agency, and one of our clients that we gained this past year is Gatorade. And so with that, we got to work with a lot of the Gatorade athletes and learn a lot about how they work and how they operate. And it's amazing to see how there's a lot of difference in each athlete's attitude, and to see the ones who point their energy towards the Lord and point back to the Lord with all of their energy. They're the ones who really are like succeeding on and off the field, not just on the field. So we're going to kind of jump in and talk about what that looks like for athletes who do put the Lord first and athletes who don't, and what the effects are. So first thing is the dangers of idolatry in sports. Athletes can become overly focused on their athletic achievements, leading to a distorted sense of self-worth and neglecting their spiritual well-being. This can create a dangerous spiritual void and can hinder their overall development. So just to break this down a bit, an athlete, whether in middle school, high school, collegiate, or pro, whatever level they're on, it's easy to accidentally put their sport as their identity. And then even beyond that, to become God in and of themselves. So not only are they making their sport everything, their whole life revolves around that, they have decided to idolize it to the point where that becomes their God. So what happens when they do this, particularly when something comes along like an injury, like Allison spoke to, and they lose this, they lose all sense of purpose and direction, and they don't know what their life is about anymore. So the big struggle here and the real danger of idolatry in sports is that you can lose who you are when you put all of it in this one identity and you don't have the Lord outside of your sport and inside your sport. Then you have nothing when it is taken from you. And if you don't have it taken from you, that's all you are, is your sport. So it can be very, very, it can create a lonely space and can really put someone in a very bad mental and emotional state. Okay, secondly, the importance of intrinsic God motivation. So while external factors like rewards and recognition can provide temporary motivation, its sustained motivation comes from internal sources such as God's peace, purpose, genuine passion for the sport, When athletes prioritize external factors over their internal factors, it can lead to a distorted perspective and unhealthy behaviors. So, this is Sydney McLaughlin on the left. She's a perfect example of someone who puts the Lord first in all of her work. She is a pro 400-meter hurdler, and she's beat her own records every single year. But every race, every interview, it's always pointing back to the Lord. She's written a book about her story with the Lord and her sport. And every success that she's had, she points back to the Lord. That doesn't mean to say that if we give our sport to the Lord and give our actions to the Lord, that we are going to succeed like Sydney McLaughlin does. But she's a perfect example of what that looks like to be at the top and to keep the main thing, which is to focus on those intrinsic motivations rather than external motivations, such as wealth or power or fame, or looking good in others' eyes. So, the role of spirituality in athletic success. Final point we want to go over. Spirituality can provide athletes with a sense of meaning, purpose, and resilience, enhancing their motivation and drive. By aligning their goals with their faith and using their talents to serve a higher purpose, athletes can find true fulfillment and success. So, what this means is when an athlete can figure out a way to include God in their sport and in their goals, whether it's not just athletics, it could be a career, but when God becomes the center of that, that helps athletes or individuals to be able to succeed in what they're doing. And jumping back to Matthew 6, as Allison spoke to earlier, Matthew 6:33 says, "But seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you." So, generally, what we spoke about today was two very closely related topics: injury, and keeping God priority. So, not selling one's soul to the sport. So, in closing, we hope that we taught you a little bit about what it means to put the Lord first in sport. Even when things like injury come along, um, your identity is not rooted in your sport or in your ability to perform. It is rooted in your relationship and dynamic with the Lord. So, yeah, that's it. We have some cited sources, and that is our presentation. So, cool. Sweet. I'll stop the recording.
All right.